Hello and welcome back to Insemination, the podcast that is all things donor conceived. My name is Laura High, your chaotic sperm donor baby of the podcast world, and I am, as always, so excited for our next episode. For this next episode, I'll be interviewing Claire-Lise, who is an egg donor conceived person who is here to talk about her experience as an egg donor conceived person and her very wild experience meeting her egg donor. We will also be discussing her experience as a late discovery donor conceived person, and we want her opinion as an egg donor conceived person, what it's like watching and seeing all these cryobanks trying to recruit egg donors off of social media, and how those videos feel. But before we get started with the episode, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. For the past few years, you have known me as Laura High, your donor conceived person of TikTok, which has been an absolute honor and a privilege, but we all kind of know that TikTok is definitely doing a balancing act, and we do not know what the future of TikTok is going to be looking like. So if you enjoy my TikTok content and you want to continue watching it elsewhere, I will be still producing it elsewhere. You can still find me at LauraHigh5 on Instagram, same thing on Facebook, obviously on YouTube. This is where I put out the podcast, but also I'm going to be making a lot more long-form donor conception content. I've already put out 2 videos that are just going to really go into the weeds of donor conception. I'm also on Threads and on Blue Sky. So please know I'm not going anywhere, and as always, you can always see my stand-up live on my website. My entire schedule is there at www.laurahigh5.com. The 5 is spelled out. Now, I was supposed to have a show in Emmaus, Pennsylvania this Saturday on January 18th, but because of circumstances that I could not control, the show had to get rescheduled, and it's getting rescheduled to June. We will have the date shortly, but I'm so sorry to anybody who is planning on coming to that show. I promise it is still happening. We just had to reschedule it. But again, I'm so sorry. But I'm going to be having some amazing other shows coming up. I will be headlining at the Primetime Comedy Club in New Jersey beginning of February, and of course performing all throughout New York City, Upper New York, and New Jersey on a weekly basis. And lastly, if you have not subscribed to the podcast, please do. That would just be absolutely delightful of all of you. Leave a comment, leave a review, and without any further ado, let's get to the episode. Welcome to the podcast, Claire-Lise. Thank you so much for joining us all the way from Dallas. How are you doing today?
I am doing great. I am so excited to be on your podcast. I have wanted to be on it for a while, so this is very exciting for me.
Oh my God, no, it's absolutely perfect. I've been now, you and I have been connected, I think, like super early on, both of our, like, I'd say TikTok adventures.
Like years now.
So we've always been like TikTok buddies. And I'm so excited, especially because you are egg donor conceived.
Yes.
And we don't hear a lot from egg donor conceived people. And I think that it is so important to hear your perspective, especially due to how, I'm going to say, feral egg banks have become on social media with recruiting donors.
No, absolutely. So I think it's it's similar to sperm donation, but it's different because to be an egg donor, obviously, it's a lot more steps you have to go through and you make a lot more money. And on the recipient parent's perspective, it costs a lot more money to use an egg donor. So I think there's a bit of a financial barrier, and then it's just less common too.
Yeah, and it's also egg retrieval is like an incredibly invasive procedure, yet they sell it on social media like it's a haircut.
No, literally. And there's a lot of misinformation that goes around, and I think that people should be accurately informed if they want to be a donor or if they're going to use an egg donor themselves.
Absolutely. Well, I would love to start from the beginning and hear your donor conception story and, the whole to-do.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so I was conceived in 1999, which is it's so weird to say, like I was conceived in, but that's really important to this kind of a story.
Oh no, I was made in 1987,
literally,
and then born in 1988. So yeah, no, I that's also how my mom said it to me initially. She was like, "You were made," and I was like, "I love how you didn't say conceived."
Yeah, it feels kind of weird to be conceived in a very non-traditional context.
Yeah.
So my story actually goes back a lot further. My parents were together for like 10 years before I was born because my mom she had like 2 ectopic pregnancies that resulted in her not ever being able to have kids. And so this was way before the time that egg donation and IVF was really a mainstream thing. So she's kind of didn't think she would ever be able to have kids, but really wanted them. And so then IVF comes around, egg donation becomes a bit more accessible. It still was very, very rare back then.
Mhm.
And so in 1999, they decided to do that. And with my mom, they had to sync up her cycle to my egg donor cycles. They were both taking shots and stuff so they could be lined up. So that way, when they did the egg retrieval, it would like work essentially. So yeah, they did that. And then 9 months later, I was born in February of 2000. And so I would say I'm on the older end of egg donor conceived people. I think with
Yeah.
sperm donation has been a thing for a very, very long time. So I think there's
Since
people,
the first one was late 1800s.
yeah, it's like as far as I can think of, basically.
Yeah, it's been a
Uh,
bit.
and
But yeah,
so,
egg donation is newer.
so there really wasn't much information for the parents, at least, on like
Mhm.
what to do, what to say, whether or not to tell your kids. And so my parents decided to not tell me, which in hindsight, it's 2020. I do not agree with it. I think if they were to go back and redo things with the information they know now, they would have 100% told me,
Yeah.
but they didn't. And my mom really wanted to have a kid, be pregnant, have the whole like mom experience. And so that was a great experience for her. However, when I started growing up, I definitely was more similar phenotypically and then also mannerisms wise to my dad, who I'm biologically related to. And
Mhm.
that definitely affected my mom a lot growing up. Like, I think it was really hard for her to see similarities between me and my dad that she would never have with me because we don't look anything alike.
Mhm.
And when I was 5 in kindergarten, they had us write down like traits we get from our mom, traits we get from our dad. And everything on my dad column was like how I look, like kind of like personality, like manners and things. And then for my mom, it was all like interests, hobbies, like stuff that isn't necessarily genetic. So my parents held on to that little piece of paper because they were going to tell me together when I was like in middle school that I was donor conceived.
Yeah.
However, my mom, when I was 11, ended up getting very severe brain cancer. So
I'm
they
so
were
sorry.
advised, oh, thank you. Yeah, it was pretty tough, but that's the age where they
Yeah.
were going to tell me. But then they were advised by my therapist who like works with like children and stuff that this is probably not the right time given how severe my mom's like health was. So we did not think she was going to live through this. And like I think they should have told me when I was young, but I definitely agree with them not telling me as a teenager was a good call because they were pretty sure my mom was going to die. And she did eventually pass from as a result of her brain cancer, but not for several more years.
Okay.
Um, so yeah,
That's
so
a tough situation.
yes, so they were put really between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah. I
And
can
with
understand, like, I understand. Like, I agree with you. In hindsight, it would have been, of course, the better solution to tell you as a kid. And my parents had the same thing. They were like, okay, we're gonna tell her like middle school, high school, which given my age group is like insanely progressive.
yeah,
But I can fully understand, given your family circumstance, how they were like, oh shit, what are we gonna do?
and
Let's just
especially
add more trauma onto this.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
especially with egg donation, there's like a lot of science behind it. And my mom was a neurosurgical nurse, so she was very like in loop with like a lot of the sciencey
Mhm.
stuff. And so she didn't want to tell me until I could really understand kind of how I was conceived. And I could tell they were kind of leaning me into it before she got sick because they told me I was an IVF baby. They were explaining that. And then she got sick. So I think they were getting on the way to telling me and, just
They
little
were
bits.
getting ready.
Yeah.
My parents did the same thing. Like it was a different rollout every year. They were like, well, we struggled, with infertility and we went through three, like it was like every year it was like a new piece of information, like getting me ready and was like, and I look back and I'm like, oh no, this was very strategic.
Yes. And I'm fortunate enough that I'm really close with one of my aunts who's adopted, and she knew the whole time that I was donor conceived. And so she was kind of there to help advise my parents. And then once they didn't really tell me, she kind of was like trying to push them to tell me because she realized I was getting more and more suspicious. But having someone who was adopted be so close to us through this whole process was such an amazing experience. And it helped me really see
So
how much
your aunt
similarities there are.
points to your aunt. Hell yes. Love you wherever you are.
She is
Brownie
literally the
points.
sweetest angel. And so she also went through the experience of like, meeting your biological parents and like having everything that comes with that, the goods, the bads, the positives, the negatives, meeting half siblings. And so I kind of felt like I had a coach to go through that. And I am so grateful for that.
Crazy. Oh, I love that for you. I love that she was able to be there for you in that way. Like that's so wonderful. And I bet that was also, I mean, I would assume maybe like that was also in some ways like kind of healing for her as well.
Yeah, I can only hope. But it felt so good to have a mentor because
Yeah.
to fast forward in my story, obviously my parents didn't tell me I was donor conceived, and then I didn't find out until I was 19, essentially. So when I was in high school, my mom's was diagnosed with dementia as a result of somewhat unethical treatment during her brain cancer journey. They gave her
Oh
whole
God.
brain radiation, which we were very misled as to what the effects of that would be. Like we were told that she'll lose just very, very high level skills, but like it won't really affect her much. It, in hindsight, I've read pretty much every study you can read on it through the scientific literature. It almost always results in them dying from dementia within 10 years of the
That's
treatment. So
horrific.
about 10 years after she was diagnosed, she ended up dying of dementia. So when I was in high school, we were pretty much dealing with that. So like, I know donor conception was not on my parents' mind or my dad's mind. My mom really wasn't fully there at that point.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah,
Such a complicated situation.
yeah, I get it.
Yeah. So then senior year, 23andMe is coming out, Ancestry DNA, all those little things. And like every other white person, I wanted to find out what kind of white I was.
Mm-hmm.
I
What
did
what flavor of mayonnaise?
exactly. Want to see if there's anything unique in there, which is so cringy in hindsight.
I know, right?
And we were learning in my biology class in high school, we're learning about all this stuff. And so I really wanted to do 23andMe, and my dad and mom were like, no. My mom she was kind of in and out of it at this
Mhm.
point. So when she was in it, she was like, no, you're not doing that. And my dad was super against it. He was like, this is so weird. Like, all my friends are doing this. Like, so eventually when I turned 18, they let me do it. And they were so weird when I got the results. Like, so I actually opened up the results in my AP biology class with my teacher. We were weirdly learning about genetics at this point. And I did not get the ethnicity breakdown that I was expecting. Like, I had this good chunk of Eastern European that I had no idea that I had. I thought I would be more Italian and Irish. Nope. So I was like, that's interesting. And so I literally told my biology teacher, I was like, I wonder if my parents use an egg donor. And she was like, Claire, you cannot tell your mom that. Like that, she's like, on the off chance that they didn't use a donor, that would hurt your mom so bad. And I was like, you're right. I'm not going to tell her. And so then I go home, my parents are like very odd about it. Like, let's see your results. And they see that, no relatives popped up. So they're like, okay, maybe your mom wasn't like, didn't know her full ancestry. I don't know. They're like kind of coming up with excuses. And I was like, okay. And then my mom was really upset later that night. And I kind of didn't understand why, but I was kind of like, okay, this is weird. Moving on. So then the next year I'm a senior or senior. The next year I'm a freshman in college, but I'm like studying for midterms. I'm 19 at this point, and I get a text from this like unknown number, and it's like, "Hi, my name is insert egg donor's name. And I think we're related. And I just saw that from 23andMe. Why don't you go check your 23andMe?" And so I go check it, and there's someone in the biological mother category, and I have a half brother. And I come to find out I have two half brothers, and I was shocked.
Oh my God.
Yeah, more so that I had a half brother or two than that I was egg donor conceived, because I was pretty darn suspicious at that point. And I can get into why I was suspicious if that would interest you. But
Whatever you
yeah,
are willing to share, I want to hear.
yeah, so I was suspicious because obviously I did not look like my mom, and I wanted to look like her so bad because she just had the most beautiful smile and like just this light to her. And I just always like in the mirror trying to do her smile, and it just like we never really looked alike. And everyone said I looked like my dad, but I didn't really look 100% like him. And then
I had
I'm
the
a
same thing with my dad. Like I look at photos of like my dad and I, and we look comically nothing alike. It is comical on how we're two white people. That's about it. And I
Mhm.
always like my dad's a really like handsome dude. I wanted to, he looks like he looked like a mix between like Harrison Ford, Dennis Quaid, had these like
Yeah,
beautiful eyes, this great like he's a good looking dude. Um like his whole family that he's related to, all a bunch of yeah, so it always like I wanted to look like my dad as well. I also am just a carbon copy of my mother.
People say about me and my dad. But yeah, I wanted to look like my mom so bad. And now that she passed, that's another new experience that I've had as a donor conceived person whose parent has passed, the one I'm not biologically related to, is I really wish I looked like her because like I have a ton of photos of her around my room, but I wish I could look in the mirror and be like reminded of her. And like
Yeah.
that's kind of something that has made me sad in hindsight that I did not expect.
That's
Um,
really interesting. I've not heard somebody say that yet, and it's a really interesting perspective.
Yeah, because I used to like when I first found out I was donor conceived and my mom was still alive, like I didn't really care that I didn't look like her as much because I was like, well, I look how I look. Like I look almost like a carbon copy of my egg donor. But I was kind of like, okay, like my mom's still here. But yeah, now that she's gone, I'm like, oh, I wish I could look in the mirror and like see her smile or see her laugh or
Yeah.
something.
Well, it's
Um,
why when people are like, well, why didn't you take your husband's name when you got married? I'm like, because this is the connection I have with my dad.
no, exactly. Yeah,
This is
especially for you, that is your connection.
that is my connection with my dad. I'm like, I look nothing like my father in any way, shape, or form. This is what I have. I'm not losing that.
No, 100%. That's really powerful. But yeah, so in my story, yeah, I get this text from this woman, and which in hindsight, it's a little weird that I don't know how she got my phone number.
Yeah, I was about to say, how she got, so this wasn't through 23andMe. This is, she got your
Now,
cell phone number.
yes. So apparently she had tried to reach out through 23andMe, but once you get your results, you're not like checking on there regularly. And like I was a freshman in college. I had a lot of new life experiences. I was not on 23andMe. And so, yeah, she'd friended me on Facebook, but I was accepting every friend request because I just wanted to be cool and have a bunch of followers.
Of course. I'm now like editing everything that I've done on, like I'm like editing all the friends and going like, why am I friends with you? I don't delete.
Yeah, now that I'm like my brain's developed, I'm like, oh, I don't need this many people to see my day to day.
Exactly.
Yeah, so she friended me. I accepted it. Had it went over my head, and she was a little surprised I didn't like recognize her right away. But again, like that's not what I was expecting. So yeah, I call my dad, and he's like, and I'm like, did you use an egg donor? And he was like, no, I don't know what you're talking about.
Mhm.
And I was like, is their name? And then I said my donor's name, and he was like, okay, so we need to talk. And I was like, yeah. So he ended up telling me that they were gonna tell me later that summer, which I don't know. Um, that's an alternate reality, but I
Mhm.
was really hurt and I like didn't really know what to expect. And so I went over to like my friend's apartment and just kind of stayed with her. And I called my aunt who I mentioned earlier, who I knew was adopted. And she told me, she's like, I know. And I was so grateful that she already knew that I didn't have to like
I'm
tell her.
I'm
And
so
so
grateful that they were telling their family because like, oh, thank goodness.
yes, and this aunt was at the time married to an OB-GYN.
Mhm.
So they were the only two people who knew. And it's funny because like as a couple, they had like both ends, like adopted person and then like a fertility doctor, basically.
Okay, so wealth of information for you, which is
Oh
great.
yeah. So I ended up talking with both of them at length about, and then they've since been divorced. And so I kind of got to hear a pretty fair side of it from both of their perspectives.
Okay.
And my uncle was telling me about how when my aunt met her biological family, he's like, it was not all rainbows and sunshines. He was like, just keep your guard up,
Yeah.
don't expect too much. He was giving me some really good advice there. And I was kind of like, okay, like I do want to meet these people, but I'm not gonna be like, oh my God, you're my mom. We just share genes. So I ended up getting to know my egg donor a bit. I really wanted to meet my half brothers. Like I grew up as an only child, and so having half brothers was literally a dream of mine. I used to have like dreams of having secret siblings that I got to be friends with.
I swear to God, the amount of donor conceived people, especially the ones who were like raised as only children, like I think like we had like telekinetic. Are we? Is it telekinetic? I think like it was like we knew there were siblings out there.
Like somehow, because like I used to always get these dreams, and then they stopped
Yeah.
once I found out I was donor conceived. I don't know if that means anything,
No, I
but
had the same thing. Like
yeah.
the amount that I would like play games of like finding siblings and everything. And this is such a common thing for donor conceived people. So it's like, I swear to God, we all know in the ether we have siblings out there.
Yeah, it's like I knew without like knowing for a
Hmm.
long time. It's like one of those things when like
Such a
the
weird
final piece of the
experience.
puzzle clicks into place and you're like, oh, like obviously all this stuff in hindsight.
Yeah.
But yes, I start talking to her. We FaceTime pretty regularly. Then she lives in California with my two half brothers.
Okay.
I found out she's donated one other time before 3 months before I was conceived. And so I don't know if I have additional half siblings out there. I've done all the DNA tests just to see. Nothing's popped up yet. I hope I do. That'd be fun.
Well,
Um,
if she donated for 2 cycles,
yes.
then chances are you do.
Yeah, probably.
Um, but I mean, you are still young enough and where it is very possible where your siblings just may have not been told yet, which really sucks. But that is very, very possible.
Yes. Or they're in a situation their parents don't want them doing DNA tests, or maybe they've been told and they just have no desire to meet her, which I'll
And they
respect.
also might not be ready. I mean, the amount of donor conceived
Oh,
people who
yeah.
are like, I've been putting it off, I'm not ready to do it for whatever reason. But yeah, I mean, if she donated for another cycle, hypothetically, yeah, you should.
Yes. And I think she got more eggs the cycle. That was not me. So yeah, I think there's a pretty good chance. And there's tons of multiples too with IVF. So
Yeah.
who knows? But yeah, so I go to meet them and I fly up with my dad and things are going great. It felt so much like the Parent Trap in a weird way. Like that's what I kept telling people. I'm like, my two biological parents are meeting for the first time. I was like, this is so weird.
So
And
weird.
we were walking around and one of my half brothers was like, it just looks like you have a bunch of different baby daddies. Like which I thought was so funny because I look nothing like my half brothers because they're biracial. So it really did look like, there's obviously different baby daddies.
Yeah.
Uh, but I really, really admired my brothers, and we were so similar in ways that I was shocked because we'd never met. We didn't grow up together, but we had like the same mannerisms and like we just instantly clicked.
Genetics are crazy that way. It's something where it's like, I'm like, if we to study like the nature versus nurture, study donor conceived people.
Oh my gosh, yes, I feel like I'm a case study in that.
Yeah, we are the ones to study because I think like we are literally the perfect ones to study because between obviously our half siblings, our donor, obviously this doesn't, if you're double donor conceived, it's a different story. But like for most of us, we are in a house where like we are biologically related to one parent, not biologically related to the other. How much are we, I just think like we are the perfect study for that.
And especially like in the cases where we didn't know. So then it's like a double, I don't know, probably not double, like a blind experiment
Yeah.
almost. And what's a weird thing for me was like music taste, because like I definitely liked some of the stuff my dad liked. But when I met my donor, we had almost the same exact taste in music. Like she'd play her Spotify playlist, and I was like, this is literally all the stuff that's on my playlist that my parents don't like. Like it was all like Britney Spears, Miley Cyrus, all that stuff. And I was like, this is so wild. And we had like the same favorite songs. So there
Mhm.
must be something with like what melodies you like or what something like that that must be genetic.
There again, like what you're like, I've heard so many donor conceived people say this, like finding their donors, their half siblings, and it's just like it really just goes to show you how little we still know about genetics
Oh yeah.
and
So yeah.
how powerful they can be.
Oh yeah. So that was just a crazy experience. And I did not realize how powerful nature versus nurture was. And ironically, I studied early childhood development was my first major in college. Now
Oh
I
shit.
graduated like human development with an emphasis in early childhood development. So I was literally learning about nature versus nurture in class, like when this was going on. I was studying for a test on it when
You were a
I found out I was donor
chapter.
conceived. Yeah. So I went to my professor and I was like, hey, so did we just talk about egg donors last week? But I just found out I was donor conceived. And my professor thought that was the funniest thing. I was like, can I have an extension on this test? Like, I don't think I'm really ready to take a test right now. And she was like, oh, no, girl, you're good. Let's reschedule it for you.
I appreciate that. Well done, teacher. I love the empathy.
I was so glad that it was just the one niche class where she would really understand. And so I'm forever grateful for that. But yeah, so I meet my donor, meet her friends, everything's great. I do start noticing some red flags, but I was very optimistic and I was also 19. So I just, don't
19.
know what you don't know. My
Yeah.
dad's definitely noticing more red flags as a full grown adult, but he was very supportive of me going on this journey because,
If you don't mind me asking, I mean, I find it to be, I mean, to me, the first red flag was the fact that she reached out to you first, the fact that she texted your cell phone, like that to me is like, ooh, no, that is a boundary that donors should not be crossing unless you've given explicit permission. So
Exactly.
that already is like a red flag to me. But what were the red flags that you and your dad were noticing?
Kind of the way she would talk about herself and the reason she donated is like when you get a donor profile, which my parents on the donor profile accidentally, they didn't cross out her first name, which is how they knew her first name, which is not the norm. Usually you don't have any information other
Mhm.
than like a photo and then
Yeah.
a questionnaire, a psychological analysis. So the first red flag was actually on the psychological analysis. They said this person, like the psychologist said something about the person has a lot of confidence, possibly like narcissistic or something. And my dad was like, "Oh, I want my child to be confident, you know?" Like, so they picked that. And there was a
It
whole,
literally said possibly narcissistic on the profile.
I'm paraphrasing, but the word narcissistic or narcissistic personality, something like that
But
was
it but
used.
narcissism was in there. Or
Yes.
the
And I'm not
possibility.
diagnosing anyone, but that was in the psychological evaluation.
That was in the profile.
And there was a ton of other stuff too. Like her dad had gone to MIT, which is what stood out to my dad when picking a donor. And then her mom was like, I think, a concert pianist. And so my grandma loved music. And so my dad was like, oh, this person feels like they would fit in with our family, which is why they picked her.
Yeah.
And there was a photo, but it was like this big. And I mean, you can't really see
No.
anything. This was 1999, so the quality was not great.
Yeah, we
But
didn't
they
have
were
our
not,
HD.
no, they were not picking off of looks whatsoever, which
Yeah.
is a comment I get a lot. And so yeah, they picked off at that. And so we meet her and she's like, we're like, well, why did you donate? And she's like, I had really good genes. Like, I'm like really smart and stuff. And I just wanted to pass that along. And I was like, okay, like I know it's so cringy. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, yeah, that's whenever it's always the red flag. If your answer is not, I want to help people, that's not the
Mhm.
first answer. I'm like, nope. And I have good genes. Ooh, no,
Yeah,
absolutely not.
I was like cringing, but again, I didn't know if this was like, she's like Gen X and I'm Gen Z. I was like, I don't know if this is like an age cringe thing where I'm like, everyone thinks their parents' generation is cringy, or if this was just like an actual red flag. And, my dad had picked up on that, like his spidey senses were going off, but he was trying to be as supportive as possible with navigating this. And he knew
Totally.
I really wanted a relationship with my half brothers. So then time goes by and then I end up going to visit them again. I go to Napa with her and I start getting like this weird vibe that like she definitely likes how I look and is like proud of me more because I look phenotypically a certain way than because I have like good character and my personality and stuff. And so I got the vibe that she really liked that we were related because I was like a flex for her.
Oh, so almost like you were sort of like a trophy in some ways.
That's how it felt. Yes.
Ooh.
And like she was trying to almost take credit for a lot of my like good qualities
Ooh.
and stuff. And I was like, my dad and my mom are really who gets to take credit. Like they're the ones who raised me and stuff. And I tell her at this point, like my mom is really sick and I didn't want to tell her at first because I didn't want things to be awkward.
Yeah.
I didn't want her to think that I wanted her to be my mom, but I was like, my mom's going to die soon, but like, she is my mom. And I was trying to set very clear boundaries and stuff and
We love boundaries. Well done.
love boundaries. And so
Love
again,
boundaries.
feeling a little weirder after this trip, but I'm also such a people pleaser. So I was just kind of like, okay, I'm not going to say anything. So I just kind of stopped responding to her stuff a bit more frequently. Like I was just not as engaged in the relationship. And her and my half brothers wanted to come visit me in Fort Worth, which is where my dad's from. Like we're from the DFW area. And so I live in Dallas and my dad lives in Fort Worth. So they were going to come visit us and like get to see like my hometown and get to meet my friends and stuff, get to meet my boyfriend, everything. And then pretty soon before that, she goes on this like Facebook rant about men and really targets my dad, saying how like basically he's holding me back, he's not a good parent, and like just made up this story about my dad not teaching me how to buy a car, which was very odd. I had no need for a new car, so I don't know where she came up with that, but just blasts my dad publicly, tags me and my dad in it. And so
What?
yeah. So I wake up to this Facebook post and people texting me because it like was on my feed essentially. And I was so embarrassed. I was like mortified and I texted her and I was like, can you please take this down? my dad had already texted her because he woke up before me being like, can you please take this down? Like, I don't want Claire to see it. Like, he's like, this is not true. I really don't want to put Claire in an awkward situation. And she was like, well, this is just how I feel. And just was very rude about it.
Oh,
Oh,
another red flag. This is just how I feel. Anytime no.
yeah.
Mm-mm.
And so at this point, I'm like, you can't disrespect my dad. Like, I am done. And so I just stopped responding to her text. And at first I get this long apology, text gets deleted. Then a few hours later, I haven't responded because I had a therapy appointment in 2 days. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to bring this up with my therapist. I don't like texting people out of a really emotional point of view. Like, I like to be pretty grounded. So I
You
don't
are
say
so much smarter than I am. My
regret.
goodness.
So yeah, I'm like waiting 2 days to talk to my therapist. Every few
Yeah.
hours, she's texting me more and more texts. She's now getting angry that I'm not responding. She makes a friends only story on Instagram and starts posting memes about how you need to forgive people. And if you don't forgive them, it's actually worse than what they did to you. And just all these memes, there's like targeted at me. And I'm like, this is so cringy.
And
But
you're
also
19.
creepy. Yes, I'm with my friends. Actually, at
You're
this point,
you're a 19-year-old. Like I know
I'm
technically you're
actually
an
22.
adult.
No, yeah, I'm
You're
22.
22.
Yes.
Like you are, I mean, I still look at 22 as like you are still obviously your brain is still
I feel
developing.
like a child at this
You are
point.
still a child. I know technically legally, but no, like how do
I'm
you
in college. Yes, I'm like with my friends and I'm like, this is weird, right? And they're like, no, this is so creepy. And so again, I just stop responding and then I go to therapy. And actually, I'm in one of the donor conceived groups on Facebook. And I did a post in there. I was like, what do I do, y'all? Like, how do I respond to this? And there's a girl in the group who's a therapist who wrote me this really beautiful response. And I was like, cool, copy paste that.
love the donor
It
conceived
was it
community
was
being like
very
tag me
firm,
in.
very boundary setting. Like I
Yeah.
was like, this hurt my feelings. This is how it made me feel. I do not want to have contact going forward. I texted my brothers being like, something has happened between us. I still love you guys and I still would love to have a relationship with you guys. Just because I don't want to have a relationship with your mother does not mean it affects how I feel about you guys. I don't know if she let them see it because I never got a response, which felt odd, kind of out of character. She starts parading me again, telling me about how I'm going to get the phrasing right on this. Something about how, she was nice to us because she comes from a better financial situation than my family does, because her family comes from Highland Park, which is like an expensive part of Dallas, which I don't even know if they come from there. Thought she was from Plano, which is a suburb. So she starts kind of going on this weird classist rant and then talks about how she has better family history and like we're just jealous. And I was so off put. So again, I just have never responded after that.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa. That's, oh my God.
It felt really weird. And so I feel horrible for my brothers because I'm like, oh my God, this is their mother. I'm like, I felt so bad for them. I was like, oh my gosh. And so I know she doesn't let them have a relationship, or not that I know. I'm fairly certain she doesn't let them have a relationship with me, which, to each their own. They still lived with her at the time.
You know
So
what? Give it some time.
yeah.
Give us some time. This could be one of those things where they need to go on their own journey, and when they're maybe a little bit more through, they may reach out again, and go like, "Hi," like I don't know, but like, oh God, that's
I'm open if they ever want to get back in contact. I am so open to that. This is a big part of why I kept a lot of this offline because I didn't want them to see it. Then, I'm still not talking to her. A few months later, so this is when I start my first like big girl job out of college. I'm working at a fashion company. I realized she starts commenting on my TikToks about donor conception. And I was like, in like a really weird way. Like one of the comments I got was like, oh, was your egg donor a model? And my dad replied under it because my dad actually used to be a model in college. And he was like, no, I'm her dad. And then she responds, her and my dad now get into it in the TikTok comment section. And she's like, well, actually, I did a bit of runway back in the day. And it just starts like fixating on this one comment about my dad being a model, which I thought my dad's an attorney. That is his career. He just happened to do a little modeling in college. Like I've never even seen the pictures, but she really fixated on this. And so I block her account. I blocked her everywhere at this point.
yeah.
I keep seeing new accounts pop up with the same format and the username, leaving me hate comments that are like comedically bad. Like, oh, your days in the life are so boring, blah. They like suck. And then one of these accounts leaves a comment with a piece of information on my dad's dogs that only she knew. So I realize who it is. It's also the
Oh
same
my
format as her
God.
old username. And so two of these accounts pop up and I keep blocking them. And then at one point I was so over it. So I replied to one of them with a video being like, this is my egg donor. Here's what's gone on. And that got a ton of views. And then she has continued to make videos about me. She's made dozens of videos about me, calling me her narcissist. Yeah, the week my mom died, she was making videos bashing my parents. And luckily, I did not see this at the time because I had her blocked. But she started to make some videos about being an egg donor. It got some traction. And so my followers started putting two and two together that she was my egg donor. And I started getting all these DMs being like, I think your egg donor's on TikTok talking about you. And she never used my name, but a bunch of people put two and two together. We do look alike.
I think I actually contacted you and I was like, I think this is like, yeah.
and they were kind of odd videos. Like some of the information was good, like, tell your kid. And then some of it was just a little off.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
she's also tried to get in touch with me saying that I should interview her about being an egg donor and all this stuff, and unfortunately she didn't realize that I was already like, you and I were already friends at that point, and it was like, girl, that ain't happening,
And you're
sorry.
not my only mutual she has reached out to. So I was getting a couple other mutuals and like some fertility doctors I'm mutuals with, some other people in the donor conceived TikTok sphere were reaching out, being like, hey, is this your donor? And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
And I kept a lot of what I've said on here offline because I did not want to cause more drama. I'm very over it at this point. She still reaches out to me. I just don't ever
She
respond.
does.
Yeah, she reached out in May most recently because she came to Dallas and like texted me and my dad in a group chat being like, hey, I'm in town. Do y'all want to meet up? As if nothing had happened. And then I think one point she was like, I think we both said and done things. And I was like, both?
That is
You
an
know,
interesting word choice.
and I'm very good at taking accountability when I've messed up, but I think this is one of the situations where it's a bit more one-sided.
Yeah, no, I don't. Yeah, yeah, this seems, even if like hypothetically you may have sent a text that may have not been, I'm making this up,
Oh
the
yeah.
best phrasing. Yeah, one, you were a fucking kid. She
Yes.
was a full-grown adult. And the stuff that she was saying, and like I've seen some of the stuff that she has said as well. And it's like, no, 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 no. This is crossing a line. Absolutely. This is not correct.
Yeah. So it's been an interesting experience. I feel like I've had the opposite experience of most donor conceived people because I think a lot of people, their donor doesn't want anything to do with them. They get no contact, no medical history. I feel like I had the pendulum swinging to the other end where it's like too much contact, wanting too much.
Yeah.
And like, again, I was like, basically a kid and like it just put me in such an uncomfortable situation.
Well, I also think that your situation, though, is unfortunately educational in the sense that not all donors have good intentions.
Yes, like my biggest piece of advice when recipient parents reach out is like pay attention to the personality part of the profile. Because again, nature versus nurture. This was 1999 when I was conceived. My parents didn't know how much that stuff mattered. And even if your kid doesn't inherit those traits, they're going to deal with someone who does have those traits.
Yes. And
And it's
it's,
also why like it's important to have ethical people, good people donating, not just people who want it for money.
and who want to pass on their good genes.
Mhm.
And this is why, like, I've spoken to donor conceived people, recipient parents who have said, if I had met the donor ahead of time, I would not have chosen them. And I
Yeah.
think that your story unfortunately falls into that because if your dad was already seeing those red flags that quickly,
Mhm.
that's and I feel like that's such a sad position. That's such a sad place because it's like we all should be going into this with full informed consent, knowing exactly what's going to happen, who's it with, everything, and everyone is good. Like and good and happy with the situation. And it would have been like, and I'm so sorry because especially when you were going through like this much trauma and emotional upheaval with like your mom passing, it would have been such a beautiful moment if your
Mhm.
egg donor was actually a wonderful, supportive, caring human being who could have offered empathy, love, and support instead of actively, like, almost capitalizing off of.
Yes. Like at first we thought that's what we wanted. We called her like our bonus family and like people would
Yeah.
the people would always be like, does it feel like she's your mom? Does it feel like your mom's your mom? Like all sorts of stuff. And I'm like, it always felt like my mom was my mom, but
Yeah,
my donor, when our relationship was good, it felt like she was like a fun aunt. And my
exactly.
brothers felt more like cousins, if that makes sense.
Totally. And I think that is the experience of a lot of donor conceived people, is that, that's sort of how it feels. And that's wonderful if that's how it works out. Love that for everyone. Um, but oh my, I am so sorry.
Yes.
That
And
is,
I've
I'm
heard from
sorry for
some
your
adopted
dad.
people that like for the donor, it's not as black and white as it is for the donor conceived person, like how the relationship is. Cause like I don't know any donor conceived person who doesn't consider their parents their parents. Like regardless of like biology, our parents are 100% our parents in our head.
I think I do know some donor conceived people who don't, but it was for, um, I would say it really didn't, it's not as much in terms of like the donor conception. It was more of, uh, the recipients were such horrible, abusive human
Oh, okay, yeah,
beings.
yeah.
So
I
I
got
would say that had maybe another layer to it.
yes.
Um, but I would say like most donor conceived people, and like I want to be careful because I'm sure like obviously there's a donor conceived person who might pop up and say like that's not how I feel. And I'm like, so please understand I'm speaking in like very
100%.
much blanket statements. I would say the vast, vast, vast majority of donor conceived people are always able to distinguish between these are my parents who raised me, and this is a biological parent.
Do you need help finding your biological parents? Whether you're donor conceived, adopted, or an NPE, please contact DNA Angels. DNA Angels is a nonprofit team of genetic genealogists that help you identify your biological parents. And this group is run by donor conceived people, adoptees, and NPEs, so they will emotionally have your back during this process. DNA Angels has identified almost 5,000 biological parents since 2019 using test results from Ancestry DNA. And they are a nonprofit because they believe that your financial situation should not stop you from identifying your family. If you are searching to identify and possibly connect with your biological donor or missing parent, please reach out to dnangels.org. Must be at least 14 to apply, have tested at Ancestry, and presumed parents born in the United States of America.
Yes, and I get a lot of like questions and stuff from moms who have used an egg donor, like asking for my experience. And they're always so scared that when they tell their kid's gonna like pivot and be like, you're not my mom, this other person is. And I'm like, that is the least of your worries. Like a lot of us are just curious what this other person's like. We're not trying to replace our moms. We're just curious and we want medical history is obviously
And
number
that's
one.
a normal curiosity. Like
Mhm.
how there are so many people who go like, well, why would you want to know? The donor means nothing. I'm like, it's literally a biological parent. Give me a break. There's a reason that Mamma Mia was, #1 movie. Like you understand it's a normal curiosity.
Yes. And like I've had friends whose parents have gone no contact with their siblings and then later on want to connect with their uncles or aunts that they've never met. And I'm like, it's a similar, just a curiosity to know what these people who are related to you are like. And it doesn't take away at all from your parents.
No, it doesn't. I would also encourage, especially like the parents that have reached out to you, or and it's like if you did donor conception, especially between like you and your partner, and we hear again, this is not every parent's experience. Like there are definitely different things, but it's like I know a lot of recipient parents were like, we did donor conception because that would mean one parent is genetically related to the child. So there would be that one connection.
That's what my parents said.
And it's like, if you can understand that, then I would hope you would have empathy as to why it would interest the child to know their genetic origins.
100%. Yes. And that's something I get a lot of like questions about from people, especially in real life, is like, who do you view as your real mom? Like, which, like, especially when my mom died, the amount of people who asked, was that your real mom who died or your other mom? And I'm like, when have I ever said I have two moms? Like, I have my mom and then there is my egg donor. And I'm like, it's my mom who died. And there was one person in real life who thought it was my egg donor and she thought I was like overreacting. And I was like, no, 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 this was my mom. And she was like, but you're not related. And I'm like,
My
so?
God.
Like, would you tell that to an adopted person?
Oh my God. What is
People
wrong
say the
with
most
humans?
out of pocket things. Like, and it's so frequent. I'm sure it's coming from a point of like ignorance and stuff. Because like if you've never walked through these shoes, it's harder to empathize.
Audacity to just say that. I
And like,
literally somebody commented on my video and they were like, you poor thing, you never knew who your father was. And I'm like, Okay. And they're like, no, you never knew who your dad was. And I'm like, one, my dad is the man who raised me, so I'm cool. And they were like, I don't understand, but you didn't have a dad. And okay. I'm like, there's so much I have to unpack here with this. There's so much, and I don't even know where to start.
And there's so much misinformation too,
Yeah.
just in the public. And then literally last week, I was at like a get together with some friends, and one of the guys was like, there was that Netflix show that had come out about the guy with 1,000 kids. What's that?
Yeah, The Man with
Yeah.
1,000 Kids on
He
Netflix.
comes up to me, goes, that doesn't really happen that often, like these giant sibling pods. And I was like, yeah, it does. I was like, I know people who are in that. He was like, you're just a niche market. I'm a donor conceived person. I know other donor conceived people. And I go, that's way more common than you'd think. Maybe not 1,000 kids, but bigger pods and what should be considered ethical are very common.
Yeah. Well, with that, I'd love to talk to you about social media and egg donor recruitment because my God, these egg banks have gone fucking feral.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, especially as an egg donor conceived people, see all of these egg donors going like, I just got my check for $10,000, learn how I did it, or the banks who are like, do you want this Louis Vuitton bag? Sell your eggs. How does that make you feel?
It makes me so uncomfortable. Like, there are other ways to make money if you really want a designer purse than to go create a whole life. Like, the eggs just don't disappear once you're done. Like, you've created a human. This is in the age of DNA tests, 23andMe. Anonymous donation does not exist anymore, regardless of what the banks and stuff tell you. They can say it's going to be anonymous, but all it takes is the kid to do a DNA test and then connect with your brother or sister or you, and then they find you.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so much misinformation from the clinics going out. And then I think that kind of can disseminate into like people who've donated and made a lot of money. And it just grinds my gears. Because I feel like you should be donating to help people, not just to like make money. It makes us feel so transactional, like we were paid for.
Yeah, making humans transactions, not a good history with that.
No.
Commodification of human beings, it's never a good path. It does not end well for anybody.
And another area I have issues with like the banks and stuff is kind of like the selection process. Cause like it kind of feels eugenicsy to like pick and choose.
It is. Well, I would say the industry is founded in eugenics and you still see all of it today.
Yeah, like I heard something about there being like this sperm bank in like the 60s or 70s that it was like Nobel Prize donors only and stuff.
Oh, that wasn't 60s or 70s. That was existing in the 90s.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So it's like stuff like that. So
oh, and it was run by like white supremacists. Like there was like, oh, it was disgusting.
Yeah, no, it's foul. And so it's like, I kind of hate how they choose who gets to be a donor and who doesn't. And like people can lie. Like I have very severe ADHD that comes from my donor's side. That was not, I don't know if my donor didn't know or she knew and just didn't say something, that it 100% comes from her side and it was not listed anywhere on the paperwork. And going with undiagnosed ADHD growing up, I had to like learn all these weird accommodations and stuff because I didn't know I had it.
Yeah.
And then, to find out mine is a minor case. Like there have been people who have like major health issues that, you don't know.
Oh, I mean, we have people in our community have died. Like, yeah, I mean, it's huge shit that can absolutely happen. And it easily could have been avoided if there was open communication, or I would say the screening process or intake was done differently.
Yes. And I wish there was like at least at minimum, like a portal for them to update their medical history. Because I always get asked, well, they already provided their medical history when you chose the donor. And I'm like, but stuff changes throughout someone's life. Like when you're donating in your early 20s, like you don't have health issues yet. Your parents might be young and not have health issues yet. Or in my case, like my donor's dad died young. So we don't even know what the health issues would have been on that side. So you just don't know. And then I would love for like, as my donor age to be able to like learn, oh, this runs in the family, that runs in the family.
How often do you have to explain how DNA testing actually works?
So often.
Right?
More often than I would like to. And especially in real life.
How often do you go like, well, like, donor conceived people are missing half their medical history and people say, well, they should just take a 23andMe and then there you go.
And I'm like, I did. That tells you like your eye color, your hair color, and like a couple of random things, but that's not going to tell you the big picture of it. And
Yeah.
it's just probability too. That's like you have 50 out of 100 people with your genes get this thing.
And it's also like, it's not medical grade, guys. Like, how do you,
No, it's
like,
commercial.
it's commercial. Like, what? Oh my God. No, it drives me crazy on how I would say, like, I understand how the general public doesn't know about our niche little world, but the level of confidence they come into our space and tell us, this is how it is. Why are you complaining about it? And going, like, not only are you wrong, but your audacity and confidence is irritating.
Or that you should just be lucky that you were created, that you were wanted.
Oh my God, we need that. I want to make a t-shirt that just says fuck grateful.
No, literally, you should be grateful. And I'm like, yeah, I am grateful that I had great parents. However, I was conceived through an industry that is really ethically questionable.
Yeah. Do you ever interact with some of the intended egg donors or the egg donors on social media, or are you just like, I can't?
I used to be like, hey, like, please look into this as a donor conceived person. Like there was one time where the girl like ended up, I think, changing her mind on it because she was a girl that made a TikTok like, I'm considering doing this for a family. Can people tell me about it? And I was like, okay. Like the one that was trending like this week, I just didn't bother with because it's like I don't want to get like dogpiled in the comments. And there's people who can phrase things a lot better than me, and I usually just repost that stuff. And I try to never leave hurtful comments on stuff, and so I kind of go back and forth. I'm like, do I say something? Do I not? And the people pleaser in me.
No, I know the video you're talking about, and it's like, yeah, that video was. I found out because I did post a reply to that video, and it was, in case anyone is confused, there was a person saying that they found egg donation, they're thinking about it, and the video was not only incredibly distasteful in the language, but also spread false medical information. And I made I think like an 8-minute reply because I was like, I at least, and it went so viral, like their video went insanely viral. So I made a reply because I was like, I at least have to put out the information. And then I found out after I put out this video, this person like just turned 18 years old. And I was like, oh my God, you are a child and you have no idea what you just did. And it sucked because I know this literal kid is like, I just made content. I just made a shitload of money. Like it's not going to age well, and they have no idea how bad it's going to age. And it's like in 10 years, this is going to come back to haunt you in every single sense.
Yes, and like the amount of people who saw the video, and like imagine if they go out and then donate with that same mindset. Because like I don't want people to have a situation like me where they get a donor who's like not the best person.
Yeah.
And like, my dad has said if he were to go back, he would have chosen someone different just because of like how it's affected me and my relationship. Like that was a super hard thing to go through at that time in my life. And like as a parent, you want to protect your kid from like being around hurtful, bad people.
Yeah, of course.
Like aside from even just the genetics of it.
Yeah, I mean, because it's obvious, and we've had donor conceived people find out that their donors are not great people, and it's a very hard circumstance, which is again why we always trying to encourage using known donors. Please talk to the person ahead of time. Trust me, you're literally having a biological child with this human. Like you want to know who they are. And it's like, as you said earlier, anonymity is gone. Like it's gone.
And it's still promised by clinics and banks and stuff, like, which is what shocks me.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, just don't let your kid ever do a DNA test. That's
They
not
put
legal.
it in the contract. A lot of these banks literally put in the contract, you're not allowed to give your kid a DNA test, but it's like, okay, but you can't stop the kid once they turn 18.
Exactly. And like, that's not legally binding for the kid.
Yeah.
And people do not realize, like something I always get in my comments with, being like, but in the contract, I'm like, the kid was not even alive to sign this contract. It is not legally binding for them.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you can still be found.
Very easily.
Yes, very, very easily. I think people don't understand how easy it is for us to find our donors half the time.
Oh yeah, I mean, we have also like genetic PIs who like
specialize
in this. Like
and there's like registries and stuff.
Yeah, they're gonna find you, and it's like, it's like if you are like, I would never want to be contacted. It's like legit. That's totally fine. Then don't donate.
Literally, don't donate. It's not like someone is holding a gun to your head, forcing you to donate your eggs or sperm. Like you have the choice to not donate. And like, if you're in a position where you like really need money, there's like other routes, other things you can do that make money, like
Yeah.
jobs.
Well, and especially we see so many, I would say it is advertised as so many donors, egg donors using the money for spring break,
Like luxuries,
luxuries. Um,
like
it's
handbags.
yeah. I mean, that's what it's advertised as a lot. And I I can't say who it is, otherwise I'm gonna get sued to high heaven. But I talked to somebody who works with a lot of banks, who works for a specific company. And she was like, well, what are the questions we should ask to ensure that the donors have good intentions? Like, what can we be doing? I'm like, you are not even fishing in the right hole. Look how you recruit donors. The way you recruit donors is recruiting people with bad intentions.
Yeah, it's like the good people almost self-select out of it.
Because anyone with good intentions is going to see your donor recruitment tactics and go, why would I be part of that? That's disgusting. And
Exactly.
it's bringing in bad people.
Like, I wish that they would aim their marketing more towards people who've had a loved one go through infertility or infertility trauma, and they understand how hard that is. And so they want to like come from a helping perspective. Like, to me, that would be a much better target audience than like college kids who want to go on spring break.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that I mean, I don't think they should be allowed to target to college kids. I don't think that they should. I mean, we kicked credit card companies off of college campuses.
Yes.
Like, it's why the hell are we allowing sperm and egg banks on there?
And especially when like egg donation is such a physically intensive process, and like the amount of frat boys who will go donate their sperm because there's a little pop-up on campus and they can make free money from it, like that's crazy.
I am very like, because obviously there's not enough time that's passed, but like, I want to see like what's going to happen when like the egg donors who are making the videos now, what's going to happen when their future donor conceived people find those videos, because they will. You and I know our community well enough. We're
Yep.
such good sleuths. They're going to find it, and it's going to be bad.
Yeah, like my donor makes videos and I hate it right now. And like she's not even saying some of the stuff I told you that she said to me in person. And I'm still uncomfortable by it. I'm like, this is so weird. It feels so like transactional.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that everything went down that way. And for everybody asking, because especially like donors should never be the ones who reach out unless like
Yes.
literally if she was diagnosed with like, I don't know, like heart failure. Okay, sure. Yeah, reach out first. Be like, go get this echo EKG right now. But you should never reach out first. That always should be the donor conceived person who reaches out. Always.
Yes. And like in the moment when I was going through that, I was so overwhelmed with finding out who my donor was and half brothers that it didn't even occur to me that that was so violating until like after we stopped contact. I was like, oh my gosh, like that was crazy. And like a lot of people in my life didn't realize that she had texted me. I was like, oh, she reached out. And most people assumed it was through 23andMe's little like connect thing. No, it was through text. And I'm like, I don't know how she got my phone number because I mean, I'm a pretty online person. So if there was
That's
an easy way to find my
creepy.
number, people would have done it by now. And it's, I don't know, no one else has been able to find my phone number
I
online.
mean, I want to know, like, did she get a PI? Like,
I have no idea. I don't know if she like reached out to like mutual friends. I have no idea. She said she got it through somewhere on Facebook, but
and it wasn't on your profile?
no.
That's so creepy. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's scary.
You know, in hindsight's definitely 2020 in this case. But yeah, that was, it
Well,
felt
again,
very
you're
violating.
19. Like, I still want to, you were 19 years old.
And I
Like,
feel like if she was going to reach out to anyone, I feel like it should have been to my parents. And that's something my dad has said. Like, if she was, and I don't think you should ever reach out to anyone in this situation, but if she was going to do that, I feel like it should have been at least my parents to ask if they had told me before just like breaking the news like that.
wait, I mean, it's why, like, it's why there is that big giant rule of donors don't reach out first. Do not reach out first. Allow the donor conceived person to reach out. I always tell donors that put in your bio, you are open to contact, you are a donor.
Yes.
Put that in your bio. Send out that beacon, and then you just sit. You just sit. And unless you have a literal life or death medical update, sorry, you got to be patient and wait. Sorry.
Because it also took agency away from my parents and stuff. And like, it was one of those situations. My mom was also super sick at this point. My mom didn't really, she was going in and out of knowing who I was. And so
Yeah.
then having to explain this to my mother, who was like in and out of it, was also another level of like something that she had like obviously no idea about. And so it's like, this was just not the time and place. And I didn't get to choose that time and place.
Yeah.
I had been told I was donor conceived. I would have waited to reach out until after my mom had passed, until I was at a better point in my life to like open up that
Yeah.
chapter stuff.
Like, and that's that is so understandable for this being in, and this, so much autonomy is taken away from us that this is the one area that we do.
Yes. Like it feels like the one thing I usually should get to choose what happens in, and I didn't get to choose it at all. Like I kind of felt like I was tossed around, like all these decisions were made for me and I just kind of like rolled along with it.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, I mean, it's been an experience, but I'm hopefully I could like talk about it online and like provide better education and stuff, because there was nothing when I was conceived. There were no children's books on how to tell your kids. There was no research.
Yeah.
And like now there is. Now we kind of know what the ethical thing to do is. We have donor conceived people like talking about what they want. So I think now receptive parents should like look into those resources, like and like really consider their offspring when making these decisions.
Well, I think that they need to consider that this is like your donor conceived child is not going to be just a child. They're going to become a full grown adult. And all of the decisions you're making honestly are for that adult, because yeah, when they're a baby, you're not worried about accidental incest. But when they are in the dating market, yeah, that is a concern.
I don't know if I have other half siblings out there. I know what month my donor donated, so I can guess that if there's another child, will be born in December of 1999. I intentionally, when I was dating, would not date people born in and around that window to avoid it, because they were also conceived in the DFW area. So, just to avoid it.
Well, letting you know, I actually, so the majority of my followers are number 1 is Chicago, number 2 is Dallas. So
Wow.
who knows, maybe the sibling is listening, and I believe it is time for you to take that 23andMe, friend.
Yes, that would be really cool. But yeah, I think there's so many like fertility things here in DFW. Like there's a ton of donor conceived people from here.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that there was like that much in that area. Is it just like a ton of clinics? I know that there's some banks.
I feel like there's like a ton of banks and stuff.
I wonder why. Is there?
I know there's a big like medical, like DFW has like in Houston also just have just like big medical things. I know Houston's more with like cancer and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just a big hospital complex here. And I might be speaking of like my bias because my mom was a nurse, so I've always been exposed to the hospitals stuff here. But it feels like in like the donor conceived groups, there's a lot of people from DFW.
Interesting. Well, maybe that's why I have so many followers from Dallas, because
Maybe.
I always was like curious. That's like, why Dallas? Like, that's cool, but like, why? So now I'm like, oh, maybe that's why. All right.
When the Metroplex is huge, like if you look at population, it's like, yes, Dallas and Fort Worth are big cities, but the suburbs are massive too.
Oh my God. Okay. Oh, I mean, that makes, okay.
Because you've got suburbs going around both cities, and they're like really big populated suburbs too. So it's just like a massive Metroplex.
Well, Claire, before we sign off, because this has been an incredible episode, and your story and unique, your story is so unique, and I haven't heard your perspective yet. Before we sign off, is there any question I haven't asked you yet that you're like, this needs to be said, or you really want to say it? What have I missed?
I might say, like, if you're listening to this and you have a friend who's donor conceived, or you know someone, what not to say to donor conceived people.
I love this. Yes, say that. Spread that knowledge for all of us.
I hate when people are like, "Oh, your real mom," I've been referring to my donor, or like, anything like that. Like my real mom is my mom who raised me. Any questioning of that, any questioning when I say mom as to who it is, or if you're a sperm donor conceived person, when they say dad, it's the person who raised them. Like it grinds my gears when people question that. And then also just like saying really insensitive things with a ton of confidence. Like usually donor conceived people tend to know a bit more about like reproductive rights, history, all that kind of stuff, just by nature. And so just like when we say something, just like listen to us, or use it to prompt further research, but don't just like ground in your points that are like,
listen to the people with the lived experience. I don't understand.
Yeah. And also if you the family of like a donor conceived person in that sense. Like, don't treat them differently just because they're not biologically related to you. If you find out, like, my mom's family does not talk to me, has not talked to me at all since she has passed.
Are you serious?
And I am suspicious it's because they know I'm not biologically related to them.
Oh my God. That is
Yeah.
so gross. That's tacky.
Yeah. So I'm like, it's like, I wish people would view it more social like adoption, even though I know there's definitely differences, but like to family, it's like view it as if your family adopted a kid. Like you would not view them as your grandchild just because they don't share DNA with you.
Unfortunately, a lot of adopted kids also go through that as well.
Yeah.
It's so weird how people can get, it's so weird how people can get about DNA and blood, whereas I do feel like we're trying to go saying there are nuanced conversations in here. And I feel like we're on but we're fighting with two odds of the spectrum of DNA doesn't mean anything and DNA means everything. And it's like, can we find a middle ground between you two?
Yes, and I think it really confuses people being like, but that shouldn't matter. You get the that shouldn't matter crowd. You should be lucky you're created. And then like the biology is everything. And there's a reason we have a nature versus nurture debate in science, because it's like both matter and it's like a balancing act.
And it's also like, I mean, you get donor conceived people together. I'm like, everybody has different feelings, like it's a nuanced conversation. And the fact that everybody needs DNA to be this very black and white thing is like, this gets us into trouble.
Recipient parents are listening to this. Like, I wish they would like reach out to donor conceived people, like hear our individual stories and kind of develop like ideas of like what could help your kid based off of people's like personal experiences. Like that would have helped my mom so much if she could have talked to other egg donor conceived people.
I do think that that is something that's so nice that certainly parents within, I mean, your parents are, I don't know how old your parents are, but I think like within both of our parents were sort of in the same grouping where there was nothing available. There was nothing. They didn't have the the internet did not have the communities. They didn't have the support groups. They didn't have the education. Nowadays, you have that ability to connect to other recipient parents, to donors, to donor conceived people. Please take advantage of that.
Yes, yes, especially with the internet. That's one of like the beautiful things about it. And I would also recommend like getting a good therapist, because like there's going to be definitely unique challenges you face if your spouse is related to your child and you're not. Like you might be jealous, or you might have like these like insecurities come out and stuff. And so I think it'd be so important to like seek like a therapist out to like talk to you about that stuff and have them guide you and stuff.
Oh yeah, especially with infertility trauma. My
Oh
goodness,
my gosh.
please go. And
It
this is
doesn't go
not,
away when you give birth. Like it's still there.
it's still there. And it's like, and this isn't a punishment. This is you need your moment. This is traumatic. Go get help first so that you can, because we've watched parents go through infertility trauma who make decisions that they probably wouldn't have if they weren't in that traumatic space.
Yes, and I definitely felt that my childhood was affected by my parents' infertility trauma. Like I almost felt like bubble wrapped for the first few years of growing up because my mom was so scared something was going to happen to me because they went through 10 years of infertility before they could have me. And so, and then there's other areas where it definitely affected my upbringing. And so, yeah, if you're a receptive parent, definitely get therapy. Try to do everything you can to make sure you're as healed as possible so it doesn't like linger on your kid.
Oh my gosh. No, and yeah, I mean, I see there's a lot of donor conceived people who are born from infertility trauma. And you hear that all the time, that it's like it pops up in the kid's life all the time.
And another thing that bugs me is when people say like sperm or egg donor to refer to the parent that is not actually a sperm or egg donor. It's just like a parent who isn't present. That also like really grinds my gears because I'm like, it's confusing.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, when you like you had a dad who stepped out and you call him like the sperm donor, and it's like that's not a sperm donor.
It's not a sperm donor or like egg donor. Usually it's with sperm donors that people say that, but that or like even joking about that, I don't love that because then it adds confusion to this whole very confusing industry.
Well, we are a community that exists. And I always explain to it that it's like it doesn't take away from anything of your life experience, of your trauma. Like obviously what you went through sucks. But the laws and legislation that actual donor conceived people are fighting for would not affect you in the least bit.
Like you can say biological parent, like if they're not the one who raised you, like go for that. But yeah,
You
when you
call them a trash
yeah,
parent. I don't, but they're not a sperm donor. They're not an egg donor. Like it's not, that's not what the words matter. They have to matter.
especially when we're pushing for ethics in the industry itself, like that's where we're pushing for change and stuff.
Absolutely. And I think that I will say I feel like there's more awareness now. I don't know, maybe that's just I feel like that's getting passed on. And I appreciate that there's been a bunch of people in my comment section who have said, I've always referred to like my walkout dad as the sperm donor. Is that okay? And I so appreciate them asking that question.
That's such a kind way to phrase it too.
Yeah,
When especially with like Roe v. Wade getting overturned, it's brought women's like reproductive stuff to the forefront of a lot of people's minds. And I think it's forced people to talk more about IVF and donor conception and stuff.
absolutely. I mean, especially you being in Texas and being IVF conceived. Um, how has that been for you?
I am as pro-choice as you could possibly get. I should say that off the bat, just because my mom was in a scenario where she needed emergency medical care that was technically listed as a DNC to save her life. And I question if she lived in Texas today, if she'd be able to get that same quality of care to save her life. So
That's
my family
terrifying.
are extremely pro-choice, and especially because it does linger into all these other areas. Like, is it Mississippi or Alabama where the IVF was now getting
Alabama. Oh God,
Alabama?
it's a sick decision. Yeah.
Yeah, so it affects so many different aspects and stuff. And then you get to the whole conversation about privilege and stuff with it too, where wealthy people can just go to another state, but lower income people are forced to like give birth and raise a child and pay for that and everything.
No, I completely agree. And there are the amount of ripple effects
Mhm.
that take place when Roe v. Wade was overturned is just massive, and how it also affects our community. And the amount of parents like in Texas who are now forced to choose if they're doing IVF. Do I freeze the eggs indefinitely and have to pay for that forever? Or do I, sorry, embryos, not eggs. Or I give away the embryos to embryo adoption.
That's something I've been hearing about a lot, is like what to do with the leftover egg or embryos. Because like when I was conceived, this wasn't nearly as politicized. I'm born and raised in Texas. Both my parents grew up in Texas, and they said it was not that was not really a question of theirs, like in Texas, like what we do with the extra embryos, like no one cares. Now it's very, very politicized and very charged.
It's incredible how suddenly something it's like, oh shit, we can make this a political issue. And now
Yes.
everybody has an opinion.
Yes, and such uneducated opinions too. And I feel like as a donor conceived person, I've been interacting with a lot more opinions from other people now that people are doing their own research on stuff. I say research in air quotes for those listening. And they think they know what they're talking about. And then donor conceived
Mhm.
people and like fertility doctors and stuff actually know a bit more what they're talking about because it's our lived experience.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's been another new development.
How many times have you been called an abomination?
Well, at one point I told some Catholic family, I was raised Catholic, and I told them I was
No.
immaculately conceived.
Hmm.
That didn't land well. I thought it was quite funny. I
I
was like,
say that all the time. I'm like, yo, Jesus is a sperm donor, baby. Fuck off.
we were conceived without sex. Like I should be more Catholic. But yeah, no,
I was conceived without sin.
literally without the original sin. I'm like, do I get perks for this? But yeah, also it's interesting because the Catholic Church I think is pretty against IVF, and so my mom I don't think told her parents who were very Catholic that they didn't even did IVF
Oh
because they
shit.
were very Catholic, and so that's probably part of why they don't really talk to me much anymore either. But yeah, that was
Yes. You have yeah, you and I both have the devil's mark on us.
oh yes.
Well, they were arguing when IVF was first invented, they were like, are these children gonna even have souls? And I'm like, you idiots. But oh my God.
Yes, in some circles I get interesting comments. Lately, I just don't always say I'm donor conceived, but definitely on TikTok, I get some quite interesting comments. I'm like a blasphemous person, I'm a bastard, all these lovely things.
It's very clear that there's a lot of people. I would say it's very clear that the American education system is very poor because clearly they do not teach biology or genetics.
I went to a private school that was not state funded. And it was not a religious private school, which I did not realize was kind of rare. We had a phenomenal like sex ed biology program. Like we had a whole year basically and my teacher had this thing called the sperm bank, and it was a little piggy bank shaped like a sperm, and you could put little questions in there and she would answer them anonymously for the class. And so it felt like any question could be answered. She covered sperm donation, egg donation, surrogacy, all these different aspects that affect your day-to-day lives, like as you grow up. Every form of birth control, how effective every form of birth control is, like talking about how the pull-out method is not as effective, cycle tracking isn't as effective, talk about IUDs. It was just so comprehensive. And I didn't realize that most people don't get that, especially in Texas. And that was something I was so grateful that I had.
I'm in New York and I didn't get that. Like,
it was phenomenal. She was a phenomenal teacher.
Go her. Yes, teacher. Rock on to you. Brownie points.
And I especially love the concept of like being able to anonymously ask questions, because you're not like being shamed by your peers in like middle school, high school.
Which any excuse to shame peers in middle school, like they're going to take. Yeah. Well, as two abominations as we are, Claire-Lise, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I'm going to just say this very, very clearly right now. If your egg donor does try to contact me or anything, one, not only am I not going to answer, but if you keep pursuing and you get nasty, you are not going to like what I do as retaliation. So I'm going to make it very clear. Just drop it right now and let Claire speak her piece. And that is my one and only warning I give to you now. You have seen my TikToks. You know that I defend my community without any recourse. So this is your one and only boundary warning.
Yeah, and no contact means no contact, not let me try a few months or a few years. Like I would love her to just never contact me ever again.
Yeah. And if now that I am being brought in this circle, I am putting that warning out now that I will not show you as much grace as Claire-Lise you should be grateful has. Mm-hmm. So we're just saying that right now. Let it go.
Yep. Thank you so much for that, by the way. That really meant a lot.
Of course. No, I always tell the DCP community, like, we may not be related. We are family and we have each other's backs. And
it is like loving community. I love our community.
I love our community.
It's like I just love the little Facebook groups and everything. Like, it's just such like it feels like a hug. Like everyone's just so nice to each other, and like, you know, just it's sharing a similar life experience. It is just a really good community.
I swear we speak our own language, and it's something that we bond hard. And I've spoken to some donor conceived people who've like come into the community more recently, and they're like, I have never bonded with people as hard as I have. I've never felt community as much as I have. And they're like, these are soulmates.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, it's such an interesting experience, and I can't explain it unless you're there. And I'm so grateful for our community.
Me too. Like, they've really been there for me when it's like, because it's something that like you can't really get unless you've experienced it, because it's just so unique and nuanced. And to have, because of the internet, and it's a more rare thing, because of the internet, we're able to like actually get to talk to people like you and me. Like, you live in New York and I live in Texas, and we're able to like have a conversation about this.
And that's also, I think, one of the amazing things that's happened over the last few years is that we've been able to connect. And it's been such a validating experience, because we've all been kind of being donor conceived is so isolating. And then finally talking to other members of her community and going, oh, if you felt this way and these thousands of others have felt the exact same thing, maybe I shouldn't feel ashamed for feeling this. Maybe there's something there and we should all explore it.
Like, it adds confidence into like trusting how you feel and stuff. Because again, it was so isolating before I found like the rest of the community. I luckily had my one aunt who was adopted I could talk to about these things. Like, finding community, I was like, okay, so my feelings are valid. Like, this is normal. Like, how I'm feeling is okay.
Absolutely. And I think that that's such a fantastic way to end the episode of your feelings are valid. And I love that for everybody. So Claire-Lise, if people want to find you and listen to you, as they should, especially as an egg donor conceived person, because I do think that there are differences, there are nuances. And if you you shouldn't just listen to sperm donor conceived people. You should listen to egg donor conceived people. Where can they find you?
I'm on Instagram and TikTok as at Claire-Lise G, one word. No like hyphens or anything, just Claire-Lise G. If you're a receptive parent looking to be an egg donor, please reach out through Instagram DMs. Sometimes TikTok DMs get like clogged with other stuff like brand deals and stuff like that. But like, please reach out through Instagram DMs. I love talking with people and feeling like I can help them either make better decisions or like help if they have any questions or insecurities that they want me to like help with. I love being able to like kind of give back to the community and help through that.
I love that. I love that so much. Thank you again. Have a fantastic day. And so lovely to actually like officially like chat face to face via Zoom for the first time.
Yes, it was so nice to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, that is it for today, and thank you again so much for listening to Insemination. I will be dropping episodes weekly, and remember, we do not just record the episode, we also film it. So if you would rather watch and see the episode, please know that every single episode is posted on YouTube, along with now a lot more long-form donor conception content. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast so that you never miss an upcoming episode. I love you all so much. You are my absolute favorites. Go drink your water, make sure you're getting enough sleep, and I will talk to you next time.